You're listening to the Eclectrocast podcast. This is podcast number 13, featuring music and conversation with David Lavery. David Lavery records under the name Glitchfield Plaines and is also the head of the Romeda record label. David spoke at length about his music as Glitchfield Plaines and also celebrating Romeda's first year as a record label. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in again to another edition here of Eclectrocast. This is Jeff, I'm here with Case as always, and we're really happy to have David Lavery here. And you guys know David Lavery as Glitchfield Plaines, and I know most of you will be familiar with his music. David is also CEO, CFO, shipping manager, and everything else at Romeda Records. So we're happy to have him to talk about both his music as Glitchfield Plaines and as the head of the Romeda label. Hi, David. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. Very well, thank you.
Excellent.
Happy to be here. Excited.
David, before we like to do an Eclectrocasts at the beginning, especially because people will tend to listen to these podcasts in segments anyway. At the beginning, tell everybody where they can hear, download, purchase any of Glitchfield Plaines music and your Romeda label music.
Yeah, okay. The first stop off probably would be the Romeda website. So that's www.romeda.net. So you can access all of the Romeda artists there, as well as the Glitchfield Plaines material that's been released on Romeda. Mm-hmm. Other than that, you can head to SoundCloud or Bandcamp to find Glitchfield Plaines material. And that's about it, really. There's a bit on YouTube as well. There's a couple of videos on
good.
YouTube.
Oh, you have a YouTube channel. Excellent.
Yeah, it's on the Romeda channel, so Romeda Records channel. So there's a couple of things on there of Glitchfields and of some of the other guys.
Tell us a little bit about your musical background. What instruments do you play? Did you pick up an instrument when you were a kid? What inspired you when you were growing up? What artists did you like?
Started really early, to be honest. My mother would take me record shopping when I was probably 5, maybe younger, I don't know. So from a very early age, I was always, she'd always listen to the radio. The radio was always on, more than the television. So from a very young age, I'd always hear music.
What were some of your first records?
Very early on, when I was probably 5, it would probably be stuff like ABBA, from being a very small child. A lot of the stuff in there was like, there was a lot of old, probably 60s, 70s records in the store. Some of the names I probably would have recognised at the time. Some of them I was probably just picking them up, and my mum would be going, that one, that's a good one, that's no good, put that one back. So yeah, I was always around records and music from very, very young. But I think it was probably, as I was getting sort of towards 10, I was making a bit more of an informed choice of what I actually wanted to buy. And it was stuff like Madness and the Jam. I became a really big Jam fan as a probably around about 10. It was particular records like Kraftwerk. I picked up on them quite early. I think I was just fascinated by the sound, and I ended up with a cassette of Man Machine. I played drums from about the age of 10 or 11, but marching drums and military style drums, snare drum. So drum was my first instrument, and I carried that on till now. I still play, not military, but just drums in general. I had keyboards, but I was kind of fascinated with the rhythm sections on the keyboards more than the notes. But, around listening to Kraftwerk, I'd hear things like Herbie Hancock's Rocket, Paul Hardcastle's 19 was a real sort of turning point for me. Sort of that was when I realised that you could sample things and so that I was really interested in sampling from hearing that. Sort of maybe a few years later, I would be particularly interested in sampling.
Well, it is interesting, Dave. Jeff and I are both very big fans of Thomas Dolby.
Right, yeah. I wasn't particularly into Thomas Dolby, but I was aware of him and I'd heard his music. But by this point, it was more like rock music that was taking my attention. A lot of my friends were listening to a lot of 70s rock, Deep Purple and Rainbow and things like that, UFO. So I started buying rock music and got into the rock kind of stuff. But yeah, the fascination with electronic music was kind of always there, bubbling under. And also hip-hop, I'd listen to stuff like De La Soul and Public Enemy. So yeah, a kind of electronic music was, I think the seed was planted with sort of stuff like Kraftwerk and Herbie Hancock and stuff like that.
So, Dave, you and Jeff both have little kids, and you talking about, your history with your mom. I'd love to hear from you. How are you passing on your love for music to your own kids? How do you do that?
Yeah, I am. I've always got music on. If they're in the house, there's music on somewhere. If there's a record playing, or if we're in the garden, I tend to have the studio door open, and I'll wander in and out as they're playing happily. I might dip in and have a little mess around. And very often they'll come in and see what I'm doing, and I'll get them involved. My daughter is probably, she's 4, a little bit more interested than my son who's 6. She's quite happy to pick up a microphone and start singing or pushing buttons.
Hey, cool. Dave, can you tell us a little bit of, now that we know it's supposed to be pronounced as Romeda, can you tell us where that name comes from? And also, I'm very curious to know where Glitchfield Plaines comes from. Is that a particular place? It does sound like a place, but could you tell us a little bit more about that? I think everybody would like to know.
I'll do the easy one first. Romeda is taken from a Boards of Canada song, which is a bit of an obscure one called Orange Romeda or Orange Romeda. So it's lifted from that basically. It's just taken from a Boards of Canada song. But I've also obviously would research the name before I was going to use it. It's quite a common surname in Italy and around that area. And I think there's a town or a city called Romeda or Romeda, somewhere southern states of Russia, I think, one of those countries.
Or maybe it's related to Rome or Romanian? Possibly,
I don't know. Could well be. Yeah, could be. Possibly. Basically I took it from the Boards of Canada song. Glitchfield Plaines, that's probably a little bit more, it doesn't really mean anything. I've not picked it. It's not come from anywhere. I know a lot of band names, a band might take the name of the band from a song title or something they've heard from elsewhere and just lift it and use it as a name. But Glitchfield just came from a brainstorming session of writing interesting things down, and I was kind of narrowed it down, and then would ask my friends, what do you think of this? And they're like, no, that doesn't work. So Glitchfield was the favourite, but I didn't want it to be just Glitchfield. I wanted it to be 2 words. So I was looking for a word that might have several meanings. So Plains obviously has different meanings, but then I spelt it differently. So it's actually got an E in it as well. So it's Plaines. So it covers both plains as in the sky and plains as in open wasteland or whatever. It kind of is a mixture of the two. So it hasn't got any particular meaning. It's just something that sounded interesting to me. That's all. No deep meaning.
David, let's hear a track from your Sentinel Black EP, if we could, and we can kind of mix that in with a conversation on Romeda. This is Altered. Why don't we hear Altered? It's the last track on Glitchfield Plaines' Sentinel Black EP. Came out last fall, yeah?
Yeah, last September.
2014,
yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So this is Altered here on Eclectrocast by Glitchfield Plaines.
Dave, that was great. I enjoyed listening to Altered. And I think it represents, in a way, what is typical about a lot of your music in that it is rather complex. There's a lot of things happening in it. But in spite of the buildup of many different elements and many different layers, you maintain incredible clarity in the tracks. There's always a danger that frequencies will clash and things will convolute. How do you go about this? What is your process, your recording process, and how do you prevent things from clashing into each other?
It's very kind of you to say, first of all. It's really just listening. That's all I can say. That's all I do. I listen. Usually most of my tracks will start with a seed, just something I've just experimented with and I've got something interesting. So I wouldn't normally sit down and think, right, I'm going to write a song. Here's some chords, here's some notes. None of my songs ever start that way. They will start with me experimenting with a sound or loops and things or arpeggios, just whatever my starting point is. And then I kind of try and build from that point. So I might have a synth line, then I would add a drum track. And then I would experiment with the drum track, build it to climaxes and drop it down, pull it out completely just for a second or 2 seconds, just drop a couple of beats out and then bring it back in. Then maybe add another layer of sort of an atmospheric kind of sound. I very often will use different time signatures within a structure. So a lot of those particularly on Sensible Black, there's a few that will use it happens in it happens
in 9 too.
It's in 9, it's all in 9s on. But the kick is the only thing really that holds it flat. Everything else is circulating in 9s.
Yeah, it's really nice how you juxtapose the arp rhythm with the drum rhythm, and then it seems to evolve.
Yeah, I like the way that it can affect the different bars. So each bar might sound different to the one that precedes it. I mean, most of the time I do it, it's mainly just an experiment to see if it works. And then if it does, I'll obviously keep it and build on it. It doesn't always necessarily work out how you think it will. When it does work and I can build on it, I think it just almost makes the tracks the way I'm using them, with the kind of sounds I'm using, it gives them a little bit more of an unsettling kind of feel, because it's not quite natural to the listener, I don't think, when they're not picking up on the loops or traditional loops.
So Dave, how do you keep all these frequencies from clashing into each other? How do you prevent that? What do you do?
I mean, I kind of skirted around it before when I just said I just listen to stuff, because and there obviously is a bit more to it than just listening to it all the time. Heavy use of EQ notches on every channel, on every instrument. I mean, but that's not the first thing I would do. Obviously, I would build the track, and then as I'm listening and listening, I'll be thinking, right, well, that's not really doing what I want it to do. I need to pull that out a bit, or I need to drop something back a bit. And rather than just obviously doing it with volumes, you do it with EQ, just to balance them where you want them to sit. Using compression as well is, alongside the EQs, also will help sort of bed each individual layer within the track as well.
But it seems like you're using the compression very judiciously, don't you?
Not overly compressed. Just using it. I do a lot of the compression side chaining off the kick to pull it through. I don't tend to traditionally use a bass track. I mean, obviously there's bass in the tracks, but I wouldn't sit down and go, right, there's my drum track, there's my bass sound.
So how do you go about representing such an incredibly full spectrum of frequencies without using explicit bass tracks? Do you do a lot of filtering? Do you use EQs in a particular way? Maybe use notched EQs? How do you do that, Dave?
A lot of the tracks I use where I use the sort of low ends. I'm not picking a bass sound to start with. Like you say, something a bit more the lower mids rather than straight right down at the bottom end. I'll very often try and deteriorate sound so that essentially the frequency range is widened by me adding a lot of deterioration to it. It obviously takes up more of the sonic space once you start adding effects, particularly deteriorating the sound. So that's why probably most of it will fall in the lower mids rather than the low end, because I'm not actually using here's my bass sound, because I'm not picking bass sounds particularly.
Right. So I'm so curious to know how you go about choosing your instruments, your sounds. Do you select them for specific frequencies?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. Like I say, when I write stuff, I'm not sitting down thinking I'm going to write a song and its chords. It's literally, it comes from interesting sounds. They might not even originate from a synth or a traditional instrument. I might be finding them just like as a sample in the real world, something interesting that I've recorded, or even something off my phone. I'm very often videoing things just to get the sound off them. I was at my parents' house about 6 months ago, and they had a child's toy, electronic child's toy, and it was quite an old one, and it was malfunctioning, and it was creating its own loop. So I was like, I'm having that.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so
gotta get that one.
I've got to get this recorded. Yeah. So I've got a lot of stuff on my phone, just weird videos. What is that video? It's just like it's nothing. I just want it for the sound.
Yeah. You did that with Spelt last year, David.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was off a Texas Instruments Speak and Spell.
Yeah.
Where I took the. It was for the Fwonk. It was a Fwonk challenge.
Yeah, it was one of the early ones. Yeah,
I think it was possibly the first one. And the brief was to write a piece of music that I think it was something that represented Fwonk. I think it was just write a piece of music that represents what Fwonk's all about. So I just took it literally. As in, okay, I will just take Fwonk and put it in the track. So just use the FWONK off the Speak and Spell. Yeah. But then decided it would be pretty cool to actually use that as the drum sounds. So they became the kick snare, whatever the beats.
Yeah, it was great. Liked it.
We already talked about the very beginning, how you start one rhythm and then juxtapose it with the drum. When I listened to ARPTech, in the beginning, it made me think of Donna Summer's song, Love to Love You Baby, I think it's called. It had, it doesn't quite have that synthesizer beat, but it has a similar kind of a groove. But then you lay a sort of a sinister synth track underneath that. And that makes the whole thing kind of cinematic. It juxtaposes things like light. It's kind of like light and dark represented both at the same time. And it seems besides rhythmic elements and time signatures, you also seem to be working with contrast or juxtaposition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think it's always been something that's interested me. I kind of like giving the listener an impression and then kind of taking it slightly off in a different direction. With that particular track, it's starting off with the kind of arpeggiated synth loop, but then that's subtly distorted gradually as the track moves on. Kind of gets heavier as it kicks in about a third of the way in, I think it is. But with the drum track, I always liked the idea that you kind of you start listening to a pattern, as in the arpeggiated synth pattern in that track, and then the drum track doesn't come in when you're expecting it. It kind of takes you off what you think the rhythm would be. So the whole of that track is based around that, really. Like, things might not. It was kind of quite a big struggle to get it to feel right, particularly with the drum tracks and the drum fills towards the latter part of the track, where he introduced like the clap that is the snare. working in nines, but trying to keep that kind of techno kind of feel. It was pretty difficult to make it sound natural. It's just that was probably what took me the most time, was to get the fills to feel right and to feel natural.
It started to swing though, David. Towards the end of it, it really started to come out with that triple meter, that 9/8 meter, that da 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 da.
Yeah.
And just the way you mixed it and the way the syncopations worked, in contrast to the rhythmic build-up all along up till that point, was really, really effective. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was hoping to achieve with it, I wanted to keep it really rhythmical and kind of a bit more up-tempo. But then to keep me interested, as in someone actually making it, I needed to throw in some elements that were going to keep me on my toes. I can't do something and it be simple. I have to make it as hard as possible for myself.
Let's have a twist.
Which is probably why you don't see much material from me, because I make it so difficult for myself to create it. It takes a long time for me to finish it. The record label's taken a lot of my time as well.
So this is a track from Glitchfield Plaines. This is on the compilation, right? Yeah? This is on Process?
Yeah, it's on Process, yeah. Or Process, as I would say.
This is on Process, a compilation album that just came out in August, right? Released by Romeda, kind of to celebrate your first anniversary.
Yeah, so it's got brand new exclusive tracks by all the artists, and tracks off the first 5 releases as well.
Yeah, great. So this is Arptak here on Eclectrocasts.
That track would be a good. The track would be good as a soundtrack or part of a soundtrack. Do you have any interest in soundtracking?
I'm definitely interested in soundtracks. I love a lot of soundtracks. John Carpenter particularly. I have worked on a few bits and bobs for people who have asked me to do stuff. But there's nothing out there, I don't think, at the minute that you can actually listen to.
Well, we talked a little bit about, the complexity of the music, and in another track that you asked us to look at, which is Ambient Greats Volume 2, that has a lot more reverbs in it than the two tracks Altered and Arptech that we listened to, which have some very close-up parts to it. Ambient Greats, there seems to be a lot of reverb in it. Can you talk a little bit about your choices in that? Why did you decide to give that more of a verbed feel than some of your other tracks?
Yeah, I don't know if it was particularly a conscious choice. It's just something I settled on trying to find a sound, really, I think. Like I said earlier, it's very often we'll just start from a sound on me experimenting with things. In my studio, I've got a Zoom multi-effects unit, like a hardware effects unit, and I was pushing stuff out of Ableton through that, and just playing around, and ended up with that sort of heavily reverbed kind of sound, and I kind of liked it and thought I should do something with that. So it basically just built from me just finding the sound. Really, it wasn't really a conscious choice, as in I'm going to write a piece of music that's heavily reverbed.
David, you on your Bandcamp site, you had mentioned how you seem to view your art as sonic embroidery. And I think a couple of things that you have mentioned along the way about using found sounds and experimenting and a lot of different rhythmic elements, combining different time signatures and feels really point to that. But, is that really what you were going for when you came up with that description, sonic embroidery, or is there something more to it?
No, it is quite literally as it is. It's just stitching together of sound to create a piece. That's literally all it means. There's no more depth to it than that. Really is.
Hey, why don't we have a listen to Ambient Greats Volume 2? You told us that has not been put out anywhere. You're planning to put that out on an EP?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things. I've got sort of close to completion, and that'd hopefully be part of one of them. It's a little bit of a work in progress, so it may alter slightly when it eventually does officially get put out. But it's hopefully going to be possibly the second EP.
So let's hear Ambient Greats Volume 2. This is a conversation with David Lavery. David records under the name Glitchfield Plaines. He also runs Romeda Records. And from an upcoming EP, let's hear Glitchfield Plaines Ambient Greats Volume 2. your Sentinel Black EP was I believe it was the second or third release on Romeda, right?
Yeah, it was the third it'd be.
Third release, yeah. What had you inspired to start the label? Why did you start it, and kind of what did you wish to accomplish with Romeda?
It started really just from conversations with friends that are musicians, and a bit of a frustration about not being able to get stuff out there. So I just said, I'll do it. I'll find out how we can get it out there. So that was, we're talking to Hetman Platov, not his real name, but from Hawker Low Hills. They're very experimental with what they do. I usually get involved in recording and a lot of the processes around them. So yeah, it was just really from conversation with him and Ambrose Chappell. Obviously, he wasn't one of the earlier releases. He came along a little bit later, but I had asked him a lot earlier to release on the label. It just took him a lot longer to put it together. So it really just came from friends, really. And I didn't want it to be just a net label. I mean, it started initially, the first few releases were all digital, but all out on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere around the world, really. You could get downloads, you can pick up Romeda stuff. So yeah, that was it, really. It was just
and on a floppy disk.
We did a floppy disk for Owlbinos. That was just because he works in such a lo-fi way. Yeah. And I wanted to do something that was probably the first physical release on the label was a floppy disk, so it kind of fitted his ethos. So yeah, it worked.
So David, Romeda is celebrating 1 year in September.
Yep, that's right.
And you chose to release the compilation Process to celebrate, I presume, and to get tracks that were previously unreleased from a number of the artists on the label. What were their feelings about that? Were they were obviously very happy to participate? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a seed that I planted. I think it's probably about January when I suggested to them that we should do kind of a collective thing where we all put some tracks in and have like a collection come out. So then it's when I ask for new tracks, that's when it slows things down with musicians. When you ask for new material, it takes a lot longer than you anticipate to get it back. So it kind of it took a few months to get all the tracks in, and then we had problems with running times. Everyone decided to do particularly long tracks, and when you've got an X amount of artists and you've asked them for a new track and you're thinking of using one that they'd already released, the running times were running over, and then a couple of them wanted to amend the tracks and they came back a bit longer than they were originally. So it's quite a difficult process to undertake. So that's probably why it's called Process, because it was a pretty lengthy process. But yeah, they were all really excited about it, and it was pretty cool to get the exclusive tracks in, because I mean, a couple of them, I think Apostrophic had done his quite early on, so he was itching to get some new material out there, and that was the one he was looking at. Morpion sort of came along a little bit later, so that we were still putting the CD together, and I asked Morpion to do something for the label, and I said to him, if you're quick and you can get me a track, I can include it. So he kindly sent me that track that he'd done.
Yeah, this track is on Romeda's Process compilation, celebrate their 1 year anniversary. And it's a Morpion track that you aren't going to hear anywhere else. So this is called Pulse 3 here on Eclectrocasts. So, David, also on the Process compilation, you have the Owlbinos of Northfield. We have Cinnamon Fog. How did you run into to Owlbinos?
That came quite early on from talking to Hetman from Hawker Low Hills. He just said to me, have you thought about Owlbinos of Northfield? And I was aware of Owlbinos. So I went back to his SoundCloud page and listened to a few of the tracks on there and really enjoyed them and thought he's offering the label something a little bit different because he is more the kind of ambient drone side of things. Yeah, I basically just put it to him, just said, would you be interested in putting something out through me? He was obviously really excited. And he explained his process of how he puts his stuff together, and it's very, very lo-fi. But I kind of like that about him, that he doesn't embrace new technology whatsoever. He works with very limited synths and stuff. He uses like Casio sampling keyboards from the 80s or whatever. So yeah, he's got this whole kind of ethos of he knows exactly what he wants to do. He's not interested in the polish. He's more interested in deterioration of sound, which is also obviously what I'm interested in as well.
So last week's big Romeda release was the new KanalDrei album, huh?
Yeah.
Did you like it? I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. No, I love it. I love it, actually.
I think you could have done a lot better, to be honest. No.
You're such a tease, Jeff.
No, he sent it me and he said, what do you think about this? And I listened to it. And I was just like, wow, we need to do something more with this. And I suggested we did it as a CD. So obviously he was very happy about that. I think it's some of the strongest stuff he's done. Because he's very productive and is always releasing 3D tourist stuff or little EPs or even full length albums. So he's very quick at putting stuff together. And he'd sent me this, and I just thought there was something a little bit different about it to the kind of stuff that he normally does, particularly his 3D tourist stuff. So yeah, he'd sent me this stuff, and I listened to it in headphones, and it really it really took my breath away. So it was a no-brainer really to do something a little bit different with it. So rather than just releasing it as a digital release, we agreed to do it as a CD.
I just wanted to ask you, your whole approach to Romeda is very careful. You are not like an in-your-face mass tweeting, you don't run a radio service, so you rely very much on word of mouth and creating a community around very interesting stuff, and your unique packaging ideas are a part of that. So do you have any plans to go much bigger, or I'm really curious how you feel about physical media. What's the future of physical media? Let's talk about that a little bit. What's your point of view on that?
I think it's having a bit of a renaissance, particularly around vinyl, which I'm hoping we can do some vinyl in the near future. I've found a couple of outlets that will do short-run vinyl. So I'm hoping that we can do something with that. It's almost, I think, with digital music and downloads, it's just too easy, I think, these days. And you don't really own anything when you've got digital music. It's just on your PC or it's on your iPod. Well, you haven't actually got anything to show for it. So there's definitely a lot of people that are still interested in collecting and owning things. So trying to make things a little bit different, like with doing the floppy disk for Owlbinos, it just makes something a little bit more interesting for people to collect. With doing the KanalDrei in the tin, the same thing really. It's trying to tap into the collectors really, and physical. If you can do it in an interesting way with some nice packaging or something a bit special, it definitely piques the interest for those that still want to own and hold a piece of music in their hands and read something.
So is this where you're going? Is like what are we going to see in the second year of Romeda?
Definitely more physical releases. We've probably sold more units of the physically released products than we have of the digital released products. So we're looking at cassettes as well. There's a big sort of underground cassette collectors thing going on at the minute, particularly with cassettes work well for electronic music, and metal bands are into cassettes as well. So there's a lot of cassette collectors around, and a lot of the small record stores are starting to stock cassettes.
So I think it would be kind of nice if we could talk to you again, and maybe a year from now, and sort of look back on on where you've gone in a year.
Both of them, yeah. No, it's been a pleasure. It's been really good fun talking to you two guys and seeing your faces on my screen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great joy, David. Nice to finally meet you and to talk with you. And I really enjoyed, you talking about your approach, because I think generally people think that musicians have some sort of magic, but it's really all a lot of hard work and trial and error, attention to detail that you obviously have. And it's not only clear in your music, but it's also clear in the way you run Romeda and the kind of projects you put out. It's truly a class operation.
Thank you. That's going to be a quote on our next year's label compilation. What was it? Class act.
And I will give it royalty free to you. All right, man.
Thanks so much for listening. We've been talking to David Lavery, and you know David as Glitchfield Plaines. He's also the mastermind, head, CEO, shipping clerk at Romeda Records, and we're really happy to have had you on the show, David. So thanks so much for being here, and we look forward to a lot of great music from Romeda and from Glitchfield Plaines in the future.
Thank you.
So we're going to ride out with a track from Owlbinos of Northfield. Owlbinos are on the Process compilation, and this track we're going to hear is the Pete Prescription's Last Exit mix of Cinnamon Fog. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.